Traders, how are you? With Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. War continuing to go on in Ukraine and Russia. We have interest rates finally going up, and we even have expected food prices to go up another 22% according to the UN. Let's get started. First time since 2018 that the Fed, the central bank of the United States, decided to increase interest rates by a whopping 0.25%. They're now saying that they're expecting to have 7 rate hikes this year to be able to go ahead and fight inflation. And then another, I have here in the notes, 4 additional rate hikes in 2023. Now, there's starting to be a few fissures, let's say, with the news about the great economy that we're supposedly having, right? So I don't know what's going to happen when we literally go into a situation where we have stagflation, which is what happened when we had the last worst president in history, where we had a stagnant economy and then very high inflation, because now we're starting to see that we may be walking into that situation again. Overall, markets in the US mostly positive. They went up quite a bit, especially because of the situation with the interest rates. Canada went up 1.61%. European markets mostly higher as well, with the Swiss market being the most positive of all, just under 6%. Latin American markets mostly mixed, but generally positive across the board. And then we have in Africa and the Middle East, Egypt taking the crown with 2.61%, most positive of all. And then a far, far east, we have Asia and Australia, the Nikkei out of Japan going up over 6%. For those of you guys that are listening to the podcast, just look up Marcello Arrambide, no H, or Marcello Trader or something along those lines on YouTube. You'll be able to see all the numbers there, all the detailed numbers that we put there on the video. A few of you guys told me in the comments to be able to mention that on the podcast. So, and then if you want to listen to the podcast, just look for Day Trading Academy and that'll pop right up. Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency news. If you guys remember, I believe it was about, I want to say 6 or 7 months ago, we talked about the situation with Binance. Binance is the biggest crypto exchange in the world based on volume. And they've been having a little bit of trouble along the way, especially dealing with some governments. They actually froze people's accounts here in Colombia, the beautiful country of Colombia, which you guys should visit if you haven't yet. But now there are legal actions going towards Binance because they froze the accounts in Colombia of users. So if you are using a centralized exchange like Binance, or for example Coinbase, would be a good idea to put maybe part of your assets in a decentralized exchange, something like KuCoin, KuCoin, because there's going to be less chance of situations with regulations, or for example, the situation that happened in Colombia. If you guys remember last week, Coinbase actually froze the accounts of Russians that were on the sanctions list. So be careful out there. Crypto scammers took a record $14 billion in 2021. Losses from crypto-related crime rose 79% since 2020, mostly based on the DeFi system, the decentralized finance crypto exchanges, and kind of, let's call it a marketplace that's growing out there. Bitcoin overall for the week and cryptos across the board, Bitcoin went up 6.84%, just under $40,000. Whereas Ethereum is just now reaching 3,000 again. It's still negative for this year, 9.92%, but we all know Bitcoin can go up quite a bit. I'm sorry if you hear the fireworks here, and you probably can't, but I can see them right here from my window. So just in case. In commodities, huge news for the US dollar. I've talked, especially on the other channel before YouTube just took it down for no reason, the fall of the US dollar. We've had a 97% collapse of the purchasing power of the dollar since the early 1900s. And we've had a significant decline only, if I remember the number off the top of my head, don't quote me on this, we've had a drop of, I think it was 57 or 67% since 2020. Well, part of the financial system that we have today is based primarily on the fact that the United States made an agreement with a country like Saudi Arabia, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest producer of oil in the world, that they needed to sell their oil in dollars. So Saudi Arabia, I remember I read a huge article on this about how it happened. They were stunned that the United States didn't want any of the oil. They just wanted to sell the oil in dollars. And so this created what's called the petrodollar system, which is essentially the demand for dollars. The whole world essentially needs oil, right? Plastics are derivative of oil. Yoga mats even are made from derivatives of oil as well. So the whole economy, not just transport, is literally based on oil, outside of the fact that obviously if you're going to send something somewhere, it's literally from oil, right? So it's important to note that this is the reason why the dollar is the reserve currency, why the United States is the sole empire in the world after the fall of the USSR, because essentially everybody needs to buy dollars to buy the oil. It creates a huge demand for dollars as well. Now, keep in mind that there's more dollars in circulation outside of the United States than inside the United States. So what's going to happen, for example, when the demand for the dollar goes down? Saudi Arabia is now in serious talks to issue oil contracts in yuan, which is the currency of China. So if this starts to accelerate, which it has been over the years, especially in the last few years. Now, for example, everybody's sanctioning Russia. Russia is decoupling from the Western system, Visa, MasterCard, everything, and now joining in Spanish you say Oriental, which means East. I always do the Spanish videos first. The Eastern system, which is based on China, Union Pay, and all these things. It's important to actually consider, to note that if the demand for the dollar goes down, then we're going to have a much bigger problem when it comes to inflation. So we have a situation where the demand goes down, the supply goes up, right? Because the government, for example, has continued to issue more and more money. This last week alone, they issued a $1.5 trillion spending bill. And what happens, for example, just think about it in the marketplace, right? A pair of Nike shoes, let's say, or I don't know, a Ford Explorer, whatever the case may be. If they drown the market with a product, what happens to the price of the product? Well, there's no shortage, so the price goes down. The value of that product goes down, and that's what's going to happen to the dollar, especially since one of the biggest producers of oil in the world now is talking with China about issuing their agreements in yuan. Now, India, as of last week, if you guys remember as well, is talking to Russia about doing the direct payment system that it's based on either the Russian ruble or the Indian rupee. So even countries, for example, before India and Russia, what would they have to do? They would have to go out, buy dollars, then give the dollars to Russia, and then Russia would give the oil or gold, whatever the case may be. And now they're going to have a direct relationship, which drops the demand of the dollar. So this is very, very bad. U.S. oil futures have shed some 27% since they have closed at their highest in 2008 a week ago, dipping under $100 on Tuesday. For the week, oil and Brent went down just over 4%. They're still over $100, both of them. And on Tesla, I don't know why they go so hard against Elon Musk. I think it's because he's not part of the club. He actually tweeted last week or during the few weeks after the initiation of the invasion of the Ukraine war. Remember, Elon Musk is pro-environment, electric cars, we got to go to Mars because the Earth is going to collapse. And so he even stated that the United States needed to start producing more oil because we're not producing anywhere near the amount of oil that we produced under the last government, under the last administration. If Elon Musk is saying that, which is a genius, whether it's just temporarily, we probably should do that, right? Well, they're trying to say that Tesla bought millions of euros of aluminum from a Russian company called Rusal, which is basically with all these sanctions that are going on, everybody kind of wants to get everybody in trouble. But most auto manufacturers actually buy aluminum from a lot of Russian suppliers, so it's not a huge deal. Other than that, major banks in Russia are seeing a surge in the demand for gold. The central bank in Russia is stopping the local purchase of gold from their banks to have more inventory for regular consumers. This is actually really interesting because they're not buying Bitcoin, they're buying gold, which is that's really interesting, right? We see literally an economic or a financial crisis happening right now in Russia because their economy is literally becoming transformed because of the decoupling from the Western system. And people have decided to go out and buy gold, not Bitcoin. Gold, speaking of gold, went down 3.59% to 1922, while silver took a bit of a dip as well, negative 3.86% to $25.08. United Nations warns that the food prices are going to go up another 22% because of the Ukraine war. Obviously, everything now, it used to be fault of the pandemic. Now it's everything is Putin's fault. Everything is Russia's fault. Don't believe it. The preppers were right. Financial and banking news, nearly half of Americans, instead of spending their tax refunds, are actually going to save their money that they get from the government and also looking to pay off debt. Now, I always remind you guys of this every week because you need to understand that the majority of the economy in the United States, the biggest economy in the world, is still 70. It's almost 70% consumer spending, which means that you and I going out and spending money is literally what drives the vast majority of the economy. In most industrialized countries around the world, this is the case, where a huge chunk, generally more than 50%, is consumer spending. Only exceptions are most of the countries in Africa and then a handful of countries there in Asia. So in the United States, where we already have some news that the economy isn't doing as well as it was before, we have a survey from LendingTree that issued for 1,000 taxpayers that said that 46% are deciding to put their tax refund in a savings account, while 37% are deciding to pay off their debt. And if I do the math here really quickly, 83% of people, and there's actually other percentages there as well, only 8% are planning to spend it. When this time of year, most people move the economy by going out and spending their check on a vacation or, home improvement or whatever the case may be, this can have a significant effect on the economy because now most people are going to save that money to be able to be able to have a little bit of a buffer because obviously prices are exploding. The U.S. Senate is passing a massive $1.5 trillion spending bill with about $782 billion locked up for defense. That's an increase of 5.6%, which is about the inflation rate, right? The inside of the pork-filled $1.5 trillion bill that they just passed, there's a 21% increase for Congress members. Now, this isn't the people, not the senators and the people that, you vote for. It's their staffers, which a lot of cases includes family members and things like that. So it's interesting to me that they're saying that the inflation rate is only 7.9%, which we both know it's higher, right? Because you're not paying just 10, 20% more when you go and buy groceries. But the government is saying that the cost of the increase of our items, of everything, is 7.9%, while they're going out and they're increasing the salaries of the people that work for them by 21%. That gives you a much more realistic pictures of what the inflation is actually doing, right? Labor Department is saying that producer price inflation is up 10% last month from a year earlier. And remember that the producer inflation or the producer price inflation is the cost of producing something. So if it costs 10% now, remember what that's going to be by the time that we buy the products. It's going to be a lot more than 10%. The consumer prices are up 7.9% in February at its sharpest spike since 1982. I want to remind you as well that the number that the government uses to calculate the inflation numbers is actually different than what they calculated in 1980. So the actual inflation rate, if they use the previous calculation, would actually be at 15, 16, 17%. Argentina's monthly inflation surged 4.7% in February. Now the Socialist Republic of Argentina has higher inflation than the collapsed economy of Venezuela. And they've been voting for socialists for the last 70 years. Now, if you didn't know, Argentina was actually the richest country in the world in the 1900s. That's why they call Buenos Aires, which is the capital of Argentina, the Paris of the South. After they started voting for the socialists, they literally become one of the poorest countries in the world. Congratulations, Argentina. Russia's economic ministry on Wednesday said that the annual inflation is 12.54% as of March 11th. They also increased their interest rates, if you remember, in February from 9.25% to 20% because of the collapsing ruble from all the sanctions of the Western countries and companies. Bank of England also raised its interest rates for the third consecutive meeting. It's up to 0.75%. And they're obviously blaming the war, Russia and Ukraine, because that's, you stubbed your toe, it's Russia's fault. Political news, some analysts are claiming that the gas pipeline The Nord Stream 2 epitomizes the policy of previous chancellor in Germany, Merkel, overall appeasement towards Russia. And essentially now what they're saying is that they essentially made the NATO group and also Europe a lot weaker by relying on Russia and giving their money to Russia, essentially for the fossil fuels. Germany's gas imports from Russia is 36% of its total in 2010. And now it has risen to 65% by 2020. So who wants to rely on Russia now? In economic news, the U.S. home sales fell by most in a year in February, going down 7.2%. The number of units was 6.02 million, which is the largest decrease since February 2021. Remember that the new homes and construction is about 15 to 17% of the U.S. economy. So if we have a situation where interest rates are starting to peak up, because they are quite a bit, they're above 4% for the first time in nearly 3 years, this is going to continue to increase the cost of buying a home, which means that 15 to 17% of the economy is slowing down. And that's a pretty big chunk. So you can see how we're kind of just crip walking from Snoop Dogg in the Super Bowl. We're limping into a recession, which is actually very likely now. Corporate news, JD.com went down almost 15% in Hong Kong as China is now having one of their worst breakouts of COVID since the pandemic initiated in 2019. JD.com is the largest online retailer and biggest overall in terms of in terms of revenue. And now obviously with the situation with the pandemic explosion that they've had and also more regulatory pressure from China, they're not having very good results like they've had before. In trade news, Tuesday, the EU formally announced more sanctions on Ukraine. It's going to ban investments in Russia in the energy sector. They're going to ban the exports of luxury goods because those Russians got to have their big old yachts and their Louis Vuitton purses. And they're also going to ban the imports of steel. And they're even going to freeze the assets of business leaders that support the Russian state, like the billionaire owner of the Chelsea Football Club, football meaning soccer, Roman Abramovich. And this is actually big news because Chelsea, I know most of us in the US don't follow soccer, but it's one of the most valuable clubs in the world. A lot more valuable than football teams or even basketball teams in the US. In technology, Delta is helping a European plane maker Airbus develop a hydrogen-powered passenger plane. Hydrogen, if you guys didn't know, is essentially part of the molecules of what's in water. And they're not going to put in any money towards the agreement, but Airbus has plans to produce a small hydrogen-powered jet to enter into service by 2035. In investment news, German investor sentiment experienced a record slide in March due to obviously what else? The Russia-Ukraine invasion. Collapsing business expectations makes a recession more likely in Germany. Remember, Germany, biggest economy in the European Union and the fourth largest economy overall. So now we have the US kind of limping along, and now we have Germany limping along. Now, China with the COVID outbreak, the worst that they've had since the pandemic started. Now we have another thing to worry about. You see how that's starting to kind of, it's kind of like a mountain where there's just kind of building upon itself. Friday announced U.S. commodities trader Cargill Inc. agreed to buy a 24.5% stake in a farming subsidiary in Chile called Multi-Export Foods. Cargill is the leading supplier of salmon feed, or the food that they give the people who grow salmon that we eat. And Chile is the world's second largest salmon producer after Norway. And international events, I mentioned the outbreak there in China. Russia and Ukraine are going to resume peace talks via a video link on Monday morning. Obviously, both sides need a give and take. War is never good for anybody. And Biden warned China's President Xi Jinping of materially supporting the Russian invasion in Ukraine. They're both saying that they need a diplomatic solution to the crisis. Meanwhile, innocent people are dying in Ukraine. Just wait until China. I'm going to make a prediction. China's going to go after Taiwan before this presidency is over. Let's see how diplomatic that's going to be when innocent people are dying in Taiwan. The Russian Defense Ministry has confirmed the use of hypersonic missiles for the first time in war, which is really interesting because it's a bit of a defense deterrent towards the West and NATO, let's say. They were destroying a depot missile, an underground depot missile and aircraft ammo in Ukraine's Ivano-Frankivsk region. So that's going to be interesting how that's going to escalate if they continue to escalate the situation. In an unusual fast this week, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway reached the price tag of $500,000 per share for the first time on Monday. It's reflecting how people, when they're worried, it's a defensive pick, right? They go and they buy things that they assume to be secure. The Class A shares in Berkshire Hathaway went up 10% in 2022, which has beat the S&P 500, which has fallen 12%. And one of the interesting things that Warren Buffett, actually, I think he made a bet with someone about this, that if you just invest in an index, and remember, this is not financial advice, right? You guys are responsible what you do with your own money. But he actually stated that if you put your money in a stock index, it's going to have better performance than an actual hedge fund over time, and that actually has turned out to be true. Now, the current market value of Berkshire Hathaway is $731 billion, which ranks as the sixth largest cap in the United States. And Buffett is the fifth richest man with a 16.2% stake in Berkshire Hathaway at $119.2 billion. And other than that, huge earthquake in Japan off of the coast of Fukushima. If you guys remember the nuclear accident that they had quite a while ago. And that's going to, I think, continue to be a big problem because remember, I told you guys over the next 10 years, we're going to have economic problems, we're going to have social problems, we're going to have environmental problems. And obviously Japan is in the ring of fire, which is earthquake country. The only thing that hasn't gone up in price is the like button. So leave a like, take care of yourself, prepare your side hustle because things are going to keep going up in price. We'll talk to you soon.